Hi guys, my name is Dean Gravina. The topic of today's meeting is how to sell anything to anyone. I brought on a special guest. He has built one of the most successful door-to-door sales teams in the entire USA for Elon Musk at Solar City. He's currently riding his motorbike from the USA to South America, crossing 21 countries along the way. After helping Australian marketing agency King Kong go from 100K in sales per month to 2.5 million a month in revenue, he left to pursue helping other agencies and coaches scale their teams and sales processes. Brock from Tiger Blood IO. How you doing, man?
Doing well.
Awesome, man.
How about yourself? How you doing?
Yeah, doing really well.
Good.
Yeah, when I say how to sell anything to anyone, what does that mean for you?
Yeah, it makes me want to just come in and reframe that immediately. So I think as soon as I hear that, I think of really that you really shouldn't be selling anything to everyone,
Mm-hmm.
but let's assume that anybody who watches this is already ethically selling, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they do have a product or a service that's really good, and they're on the phone with somebody who they can really help. Then I'm like, yeah, look, cool. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about how we can really turn any one of these prospects into buyers. Does that make sense though?
Yeah, man, 100%, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something I think we will touch on later on in this call. Obviously,
It sounds sexy though.
it
It's a sexy
does.
title, right?
It does, right?
Yeah, like who doesn't want to sell anything to everybody? And
No,
and
yeah. I
yeah,
think a big thing that we'll touch on is that, I mean, I think you can sell anything to anyone, but at the same time, you can try to at least, but
and
um,
should you?
and should you? Yeah, and I guess that's the real sort of topic of today. How to, should you, everything around that. So I guess
Yeah.
we can get to sort of like the second question, and then we can sort of deep dive into that a little bit further. But when did you sort of figure out that you were good at sales, man?
For whatever reason, I uh I grew up in a small town and we had family and friends that had a fireworks stand.
Mhm.
So I grew up selling fireworks in a stand from like the age of 6 or 7. And my family they were kind of quiet. They're not like the type to be like, I don't know, to be like wanting to go chat with people at the window. So I'd
Yeah,
always be the one, they'd be like, you're up first. And so I didn't have a strategy or anything, but I was
mhm.
just a kid that liked selling. And I had
Yeah,
other mentors in my life. I had some other people in my life that were like, you should get into sales. And I just never took it seriously.
mhm.
It wasn't really until I had my back against the wall and I didn't want to know what I wanted to do as a
Yeah,
career,
yeah.
that I got into sales. And I ended up crossing paths with another really great mentor in the door to door company who
Mhm.
bought me a book called The Psychology of Sales by Brian Tracy. I
Mhm.
don't know if you've read that or heard of that author.
I've heard about it. I haven't read it yet though.
That was kind of my gateway drug to like self development.
Mhm.
And that was when I made the realization that you're not really born. You're not a natural. You're not just born. Like there's a stigma around like, yeah, you're just a natural born salesman, right? You
Mhm.
hear people say it all the time. And I
Mhm.
think there's some people that sure, maybe your lifestyle, the way you were raised, maybe you're more outgoing or you have specific traits that might lead to you getting in and, being better at sales than somebody else. But it's my belief that like anybody can learn to be a sales professional and be a killer salesperson
Yeah.
if they take the time to learn the skills and the psychology behind it.
What was it in that book that sort of got you across the line? Was there something in particular
So
that you read that book and you
yeah,
were
it
sort
was
of,
so many things. So many things. I
yeah.
think I think what stood out first is his journey. He just walks through how he was in door to door sales, which
Mhm.
resonated with me at the time,
Yeah.
and how he like started asking the people above him
Mm.
what they were doing. Because there's always wherever you go, there's always somebody who's selling more than you. And
Yeah.
so it's just the curiosity to go out and start asking them what they're doing. And so he
Yeah.
started getting advice, and the advice was initially like, go knock more doors, go get more no's. And so armed with that, he went out and started doing that,
Mhm.
and he got more sales. But
Yeah.
then he noticed the guy at the very, very top wasn't running around and wasn't seeming to be nearly as busy.
Right.
And he's like, what's that about? And so it was like
Right.
that was the next level of becoming more efficient with the sales
Yeah.
process and really getting a system that works as opposed to just speaking to more people. Because you always get more sales if you get more volume,
Yeah.
but you can also wear yourself out and never really get anywhere like
Hmm.
really worthwhile or be like a very top performer. To be at the very, very top, you've got to become more efficient and you've got to get more out of every meeting and hold less meetings or less lengthy meetings with people that aren't really going to be the right fit, that aren't ever going to buy from you,
Yeah.
knowing where to pull the plug on that. So that story in his book, that kind of resonated because then that started making me want to learn from the top performers in whatever place I was at. And he also talks about like, it really resonated. It was, I think he called it car tuition or something like that. And it was like listening to audiobooks in the car. And the analogy he used was if you listen to an audio tape every day driving out to area when you were going to go knock doors, it would be the equivalent of earning like a bachelor's or
Mm.
earning some type of degree every
I've heard
year.
that one. I've definitely heard that one before.
That's all Brian Tracy. And so that was kind of like I said, the gateway drug to self-development and becoming
Mm.
a professional salesperson of like,
Hmm.
cool. So if I just put that time in, I'm going to learn. So then I just started learning from all the old, all the old school sales
Yeah.
greats. And now it's kind of, evolved into being like, okay, some of that stuff doesn't really work anymore, but it's a great
Yeah.
mindset,
Yeah.
great baseline mindset, but naturally over time, things just change.
Yeah. I think the interesting thing that I've really learned from you is that, I think the biggest thing that you've mentioned and you've spoken about it a few times is the efficiency aspect, right? Because you see a lot of people um, online sort of preach, it's a numbers game. It's a numbers game. You got to knock more doors. You've got to just get more no's. But the interesting thing for you is that, you've mentioned to me in a couple scenarios where you've actually done less to get more. And that's, I mean, I'm not in the sort of, I don't have this, obviously, that sales sort of experience that you have. But from my perception, it's common knowledge for people to just try and do more in sales, right? Like just get more dials in, speak to more people, have more sort of talk time, and it's a numbers game. So I'd love you to sort of touch on, and I think this is really valuable for whoever's watching this and changing that perception of because basically what you're saying is you can actually do quote unquote less to get more of an outcome. I want you to, if you can deep dive into what your
Yeah.
thoughts are, if you want to provide examples, you can. Yeah, let me know.
Yeah. Happy to. It's actually a really cool topic because if you're new to sales or if you're just starting out in a sales role, it's
Mm-hmm.
almost like kind of do the opposite of what I'm telling you that I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing
Mm-hmm.
because you need to get the reps in. Like if you're in door-to-door sales right now, something you should be doing or yeah, let's use door-to-door sales. If you're in door-to-door sales right now and you're going out and you're knocking 50 doors a day, start running. Like run between the doors. Knock 75 and you'll get more sales, right? Like that's just the numbers game. That's how that'll work. So there is the numbers game side of it. Like there is a point in your career where you just need to get more volume and you need more reps because you kind of need to go through and actually see what's working, see what's not working, and learn the hard way. But then you get to a point where you kind of graduate and you're like, cool, I'm good at what I do. I know the conversation I need to have, but now it's about optimizing for how much energy you have in a day.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? So you're like
Yeah.
optimizing, like you only have so much really good energy to give people. And so if you're a savvy salesperson and your calendar, for example, has 10 calls in it and they're each an hour long, like
Mm.
good on you. You're a hard worker. You're working your ass off, but really you're kind of going past like there's going to be, degradation towards the end of the day. You're just not going to have the same energy. So you're kind of I would say you're probably losing connection on those last three calls. You're probably not
Yeah.
giving those people the same energy that you gave the first 7 on the
Yeah.
day. So that's what I started doing, is optimizing my day and taking calls out of my calendar. And then my sales went up, which surprised me, to be honest, because I was like, how are my sales going to go up? Like, I know I need to change something,
Yeah.
but like, how is taking less calls going to get me there? But I just trusted my gut on that. And that's what happened.
Yeah. And I guess from that, I mean, we can talk about anything. We can talk about door to door, we can talk about online, whatever you want. I think a question for you is what obviously taking less calls is one aspect, but then the question really is, well, how does that change your current calls? How does that change your follow-up sequence? How does that sort of change everything? Do you want to touch on that? If you know what I mean.
So help me understand. You mean when you take less calls,
Yeah.
how does that help?
How does
You
how
have
does
more
that help,
energy?
and how does that change the process of the calls? So
Sure.
like you say, when you're just getting started, it's just you're running from door to door, and you're just trying. It's a volume game, and obviously the length of those conversations are probably less. You're probably paying less attention. You're probably streamlining that conversation. How does it change, or does it change when you're taking less
Yeah.
calls, and you're going through a different process?
But I think when you're tired, you just don't tune in.
Mm,
You're not as tuned into the other person's energy, and you're just
mhm.
not as present with them in that meeting, whether it be door to door or whether it be a Skype call or whatever. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's not, you just can't really give them the same amount of like love and care, as you would if you were like fully energized,
Mm,
right? It's like operating a vehicle when you're tired,
mhm. Yeah,
so you gotta consider that, and think of like, how many deals are you killing just for the sake of holding more calls? How
mhm.
many deals are you killing because you're not really showing up 100%?
Mm. And
And then
and
you're making
what?
yourself more tired,
Yeah,
right? Because you're like overdoing it, and you're getting more
yeah,
no's, and you're getting frustrated because you're getting more no's. Whereas if you took less calls, you can actually close more deals.
exactly. Yeah, I guess what would I mean? Obviously, being less focused, right? So talking about that, like, do you have some examples of either yourself or people that you coach when you see that they're sort of fatigued, they're doing they're doing too much volume? What are the sort of key sort of elements of, or what things that do you think they're missing out on? Whereas from people that are
Yeah.
doing less calls, what are the things
Yeah.
that you think that they're sort of really, obviously the detail is one of them, but is there a particular thing? Like, obviously,
Yeah.
oh,
Just to
actually,
be
I'll let
honest,
you
I don't
answer
think
that.
any of my clients are really, yeah, I don't think any of my clients are really struggling with that,
Yeah.
because like none of them have like calendars that are bursting with leads, just
Hmm.
to be real. It
Hmm.
was really from a personal, that's why I'm almost hesitant to like share this, because, for anybody listening to this, like, this probably won't really matter unless you're working for a
Hmm.
company
Yeah.
that's providing a ridiculous amount of leads,
Hmm.
or um, yeah, unless you're working for a company or you own a company and you're currently
Yeah.
the salesperson of that company and you're just handling an ungodly amount of leads, it's probably not the most helpful information. But I
Hmm.
just happened to be at a company where that was the case, and it was a wild discovery,
Hmm.
because I remember going to my boss, and I was in a sales slump. Like, my sales had dropped.
Hmm.
I'd become burnt out.
Hmm.
And when you're burnt out and you're trying to like kind of swing through your slump and just
Yeah.
try and like, okay, I just need to speak to more people. Um, it can kind of either make it worse or just kind of leave you in the same spot. And so I remember going to my boss and being like, at King Kong, and being like,
Hmm.
hey man, I'm frustrated. Deals aren't dropping.
Hmm.
Look, I want to move to a 4-day work week. And I also want to reduce the amount of calls that are coming to my calendar. And he was like, no. He's like,
Crazy, man.
no. Like, dude, how does that make
Yeah.
any sense? Like, bro, like, you're struggling right now. You're having like your worst year,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
And you're suggesting to me that you should go to a 4-day
Mm.
work week, and moved from doing like 8 to 9 calls a day
Yeah.
to like 5 to 6. And I'm like, bro, I don't know. I don't have anything to back this, but I just feel like that's what I need.
Yeah.
I feel like that's what I need. And
Yeah.
maybe that's kind of the lesson, is listening to your intuition.
Yeah.
You know, I
I
just
was gonna
listened to my
say.
intuition. My gut was telling me that's what I needed, even though it didn't make actual sense on paper.
Mm,
And I'm really grateful because for whatever reason, he said, okay, let's give it a shot. But like, you
mm.
got like a month. I think he gave me
Yeah,
a month.
man.
He's like, dude, if this can, like, if this doesn't turn around in a month, like, bro, like you're going back to a working normal, and don't tell anybody else. Also, like, don't tell anybody, bro.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like, you can't
Yeah.
be like, none of the other guys can know that you're, doing this. And so I was like, okay, well,
Yeah.
that also kind of fueled me because I was like, well, now I got to make this work. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So
And
there's a
anyways,
couple of aspects to
sure
that.
enough,
Yeah. Yeah, keep going.
yeah. And I mean, sure enough, that was 6 months into the year. I was having my worst year
Hmm.
at the agency, and here I'm in. This is year 5.
Yeah.
So really, I should be getting better, not worse, right? And
Mm.
so a lot of things at play here, but sure enough, I did 80% of my revenue that
Hmm.
year in the last 6 months.
Crazy.
So I was six
Crazy,
months
man.
in, thinking it up, and then 80% of my revenue on the entire year was done in that last 6 months.
Wow. That's amazing. Well, there's a couple of points on that, you know. Firstly, you said trusting yourself, you know, really getting in tune with your sort of emotions and how you're feeling and what you know and what you're seeing. Obviously, you had the track record that what you were doing wasn't working. So, I mean, at the end of the day, like as you say, like, you know, doing more of what's working, it's not gonna make it work. There's that aspect. There's also, you know, obviously if you are in a job, getting the trust from who you need to um repeat that. So getting the trust, getting trust from who you sort of who your management is, or if it's the boss,
Yeah,
getting the trust from the boss, right?
yeah,
Because you obviously did something before that to earn that trust, you know.
yeah. Like,
Whereas,
I dare you to go
mm,
try that in your first week at a company, and you'll get laughed out of the room and potentially fired. Luckily, I
exactly,
was known as a hard worker. I had already put
yeah,
the years in. I was
yeah,
the guy that would go and unlock the office when
uh-huh,
it was still dark outside,
uh-huh,
and I would be the last one out of the office, and I'd leave and I'd lock that office. So
yeah,
they knew me they knew it wasn't coming from a place of not being a hard worker, and I'd
mm,
already done enough numbers for the company that they knew I was capable. So those were things that gave me negotiation power in that.
yeah.
Whereas if I
Well,
was
yeah.
like a newbie coming in and asking for these special perks, I should have been turned down.
Well, let's pretend there's no boss. I mean, I think you've also got to have a proven track record to convince that for yourself, you know, because
Yeah,
whether you're
for
having
sure.
that same conversation with a boss or yourself, it should really be the same conversation, shouldn't it? You know, have I
It really
earned
should.
this? Do I really need this?
Mm,
You know, and obviously in the position that you were at, it's like, yeah, like this something has to give. Um, all right, cool. So now that we're sort of talking about like some sort of like resistance point, I guess the next sort of question really asks like goes through um so you figured out that you're probably burnt out, you were out of tune with the conversations that you were having, it just something wasn't working. Um how did that sort of I think we already touched on how did that sort of change the conversations that you were having, but then also going into like how did that help you close more deals that had more resistance in those deals, so bigger objections, you know were you able to handle those better, you had more sort of stamina to fill up your pipeline and manage them over time, like how did that change the whole game for you?
yeah, I think the reason why I asked to move the calendar to like 5 to 6 is I just knew that was my sweet spot. I knew
Mm,
that where days where I had that I would have enough energy to like bring it for those 5 to 6 calls.
yeah.
So that's kind of what it was, just managing
Mhm.
like the energy of what I need for the day.
Yeah.
And so yeah, the calls are better because I could show up 100% present and bring it for
Mm,
all of those calls.
mhm.
And people feel that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
um Going through those deals that sort of like, is there any like it may have been at, from a digital standpoint or from like a door-to-door sales, do you have like an example that you sort of had like maximum like objections, maximum resistance,
Yeah,
and that
so many.
what did you do? So like for people watching this, like how did like, well, like I'm looking for like a light bulb scenario. Is there like a light bulb
Yeah.
scenario where you sort of yeah.
Yeah, so I've had so many I can't count, and I've always walked away being like, never doing that again. Never doing that again. And what I mean by that is, for example, we sold a high ticket coaching program, and what we found is that it was a high enough price that people really wanted to know what it was. And so if we spent too much time selling it all to them, right, we didn't get the outcome we desired because we made it all about us. So what we designed was having a marketing strategy that funneled them through, telling them all about the program, right? Like a um, I don't know what you call, like a demo video almost prior to that, and that really helped, right? But what we found is that if someone booked in a call with us and booked, and we had a 30-minute, 45-minute chat with them, and they hadn't seen that it was kind of a lost cause because they just didn't know enough about the program. They kind of needed to see that video in order for us to buy, in order for them to buy. And anyways, I ended up, I was the only one on the team that ever closed one where they hadn't seen the demo video, and it took me like 2 hours. And so massive resistance. The guy wanted to know everything, and it was great, right? I got the deal. Cool, good job. But really, the lesson is just like you using the systems, like automating the things that can be automated, right? And not like if it's that hard to bring somebody on, then you're doing something wrong. Like sales shouldn't ever feel like you're hitting a massive resistance and you're having to like push through it. It shouldn't feel like that. Like I don't know about your experience, but you think back to something like your best deals that you've closed, right? They happen super naturally,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like the person's excited about it, it's flowing. And so a lot of the things I try and help my clients with is how do we like find that sweet spot? How do we make the sales call fun? How do we bring up the objections in a light way to where they're playful and the customer is almost handling their own objections and you're solving a problem together as opposed to you trying to like handle everything like a warrior ninja coming in and like chopping up every objection they throw at you, right? It's just the wrong frame to come in. So anytime when you ask me that question and I think back to any of those calls that had like massive resistance, it's just like the wrong, typically I'm missing a step. That's really, to me, it's more of a symptom that I'm either missing a step. I've skipped a step. I'm too far ahead, and now I'm in an area of the sale that the client's not ready for.
Yeah.
Or B, I'm selling to somebody that's just really not the right fit.
Yeah. And super cheesy.
Like they're maybe not like
yeah, I was going to say a super cheesy example is like I watched like a reel of Grant Cardone and he brought two guys in. It's like, sell me this water. The other guy is like trying to sell it. And the other guy just, first question, are you thirsty? You know what I mean? Just it's, and even though that was so cheesy, what I just said, it's as simple as that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, just first finding out if they're even like really spending the time to qualify them as opposed to just coming in. And I see it over and over and over too. So many guys get on and they have like this prepared pitch and they spend like the whole call pitching and going over all their services and how long they've been in business and why you should trust them and all this stuff. And you can see like when I watch these, like you can see the client's eyes just like gloss over.
Yeah.
Because they're so focused on what's in it for me.
Yeah.
They're there to talk about themselves. They have a goal in mind. And if you're not spending any time extracting that and finding out what's really driving them, then you're just killing the rapport, you're killing the deal, and you're making the likelihood of turning them into a prospect super, super low.
Yeah. 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 And next one is like, now that we've sort of spoken about that, so I think your main points are the process. So what are the value assets that you're providing prior? And then obviously, just making sure that you're at the right stage. Sometimes you might need to pull back and go, oh, I forgot that step. So I think that's what you're trying to basically say, which is great. What happens where you feel that you're at the right stage and you've followed the steps, you've provided all the resources, and everything's sort of looking really, really good in your perception, but you get to the end, and this is a really obviously common thing. I need to think about it. I need to speak to my wife. I need to speak to the dog. I need to speak to the cat. Or I'll get back to you next week. How does that make you feel?
I've never gotten those objections. It's the first time I've heard that.
Yeah, nah.
So yeah, those are really common. Pricing objection, whatever. Like there's so many objections, right? And if you're selling like digital marketing, there's probably the same handful of 5 that pop up. So it's like, how many times are you going to hear the objection before you start devising a plan to address it ahead of time? You know what I mean? So 2 things. I'm happy to talk about how to address them live in the moment, and then I'm happy to maybe talk about how to avoid them altogether. So the partner objection is easily avoided by just calling someone ahead. So if you have a meeting tomorrow at 3 p.m., you call them ahead, introduce yourself, confirm the meeting, and then ask who else is involved in their decision-making process. And they'll tell you. And then you're like, cool, have them join the call. And if they can't, reschedule it. If you just take that one little step and do that before your meetings, you'll avoid that partner objection for the majority of the time. And I think I want to think about it objection. Well, either way, yeah. Well, we'll talk about that one too. So in that one, you want to discuss that during the call, and you want to find out why now is a good time. So what that really means is typically they haven't gotten enough information to make a decision. They're not convinced, right? Or there's no urgency. There's not enough buying desire. There's not enough urgency. So it's like, yeah, we want to think about it. We have, we're not in a hurry to do this. And so one of the things you want to ask on every call is at some point, and I suggest not asking this at the start or at the end of the call, but right in the middle, right when you've opened up the discovery around their pain points and you've gotten clear about their goals and their desires and why they're important to them, that's when you really want to start asking them why now is a good time. Because it's going to be more real for them. Like they're starting to see what's actually going to come from this transformation, and they're starting to get excited about actually being there. And so now it's more of like, I guess I do want to do this. And so that's where I want to ask, so why now? Right. So,
Yeah.
So that's a strategy to kind of avoid getting those. But yeah, I'm happy to share like how to address them when they come up too, if you'd like.
Yeah. I mean, do you know what's interesting as well with what you say? This is a scenario we can just deep dive, because the other question is also, what do you do when the actual decision maker is not on the call? So, for example, you're doing a pitch and it's to a big company and you're pitching to the marketing manager. I mean, I'd love for you to touch on that, like, because there's all these different examples. In some scenarios, you're actually pitching to the person who's qualified to make the decision, but then sometimes you're pitching to someone who it's not even their business, So yeah, whatever you feel. Well, I mean, just maybe one really good example of like how you sort of navigated through something.
Yeah, I'll kind of share what I found. So sometimes people throw out objections as a smokescreen, right? Where they say they need to speak to their partner when they really don't. They actually can make the decision. They're just afraid to like tell you how they really feel, or there's a hidden objection, and so that hidden objection ends up masquerading as, oh yeah, I have to talk to my partner, because they just don't want to like divulge what's actually holding them back. And so one of the things you can do to get around that and just open them up is simply to always acknowledge like their objection. Okay, yeah, hey, no problem, not a problem. Let me ask you this: if they were a yes, would you be a yes? Like if your partner was 100% on board, how do you feel about it? And if they say, I'm a little concerned about this. Okay, cool. Now you've uncovered the objection and you have an opportunity to explore that together. But if they're like, yeah, I'm on board. If he's on board, I'm on board. If she's on board, I'm on board. Okay, cool, awesome. Well, hey, if you don't mind me playing devil's advocate here, what happens if they said no? Or hey, what do you think they would say? You know, now you can kind of get some feedback from them on why their partner would say no. And typically that ends up bubbling out the thing that they're actually, right? They're using their partner as a decoy to now share what their partner would potentially have a problem with. And that a lot of times is actually their problem. And so then now you can discuss that together. And if they really need time, like I'm just, people are tired of salespeople trying to push them into buying without their partners just for the hell of it, just for like, let's make the sale. So I'm always doing it in just a discovery way of being interested and curiosity. And many times it just leads to the sale naturally. But if they're really like, if they need to speak to the partner, that's cool. Okay, awesome. What is your decision-making process? Now I just want to unpack what that process looks like.
Yeah.
When's the last time you guys made a decision like this? When's the last time you guys spent this kind of money? What was your process like? So now I just want to uncover how they make that decision so that I know how I can support that person. What do they need from me? Is it a Loom video? Do they need a proposal? Should we all get on a call? Like I just need to figure that out so that we can streamline that next process and set up the next call and move the deal forward.
I don't know if you're happy to give your number one line away to the world.
Got to pay for that. Which one's my number one line? Happy to be wrong?
Happy to be wrong, man.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Tell me if I'm wrong.
This is like a technical, a pretty technical, like NLP type of stuff. But this is the use of priming language. And if you notice, like I kind of used some priming there when I described like, hey, if you don't mind me asking, hey, maybe I'm not sure if you thought about this, or hey, I hope you don't mind me asking this, or hey, I'm happy to be wrong, or hey, correct me if I'm wrong, but it kind of seems to me like you guys like what we're doing. It kind of seems like we're on the same page around the strategy, that the budget's in alignment, and hey, maybe I got it all wrong, but it seems like we're getting along, and you like us, which I think is important.
I really like that. I have
get
to be honest.
going?
Yeah, I have to be honest with you, man. I think like, out of like, that's just been the one thing that I think is been like for people watching this, if they just apply even that one line, it makes a massive difference, and I don't know what it is because, you've done more learnings about it than me, but happy to be wrong. Like, there's something about it, like you're sort of putting it on you, like I've made a mistake, I'm happy to be wrong, but blah, 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 blah,
Here's what I think it is. I think you're immediately giving them permission to correct you. So now there's no pressure. Like there's zero pressure now. And so that way it's like if I'm like, hey, why don't we get this started? Hey, you know what? Like that's kind of the old school sales strategy is like assume the sale. And you're like, well, hey, you know what? It's been great speaking, Dean. Like, why don't we kick this thing off, huh? Why don't we just kick this off? What do you say, Dean? Right? And that's the old school sales mentality that exists. And it's called like a trial close. Right? And I'm with it. Do it, but prime it. Hey, Dean, like happy to be wrong, but man, it seems like you're happy with everything. And it seems like you'd like to kick this thing off. What do you say? Now I've already said it's cool if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
So now if you're like, hey, I'm not quite ready because this and this, then I don't feel like I get caught with my pants down. Because if you ever tried that hard close, that test close, and then the client's like, I'm not ready, you can kind of feel them pull away. It's kind of like you're doing a little dance and they're pulling away from you. Whereas when you do the happy to be wrong, they're almost leaning in.
Yeah.
So there's certain people when you're talking to them where like they just make decisions quickly and you just need to get out of their way. It's like, don't overcomplicate it. They don't need all of the information to buy from you. They just need to know if you can solve the problem. So I love those types of people because you can get to a no or a yes very quickly and you don't have to waste your time.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to highlight like two things about objection handling. So number one is like when the objections come up at the end of a call, you first want to like isolate them. So you would just want to like isolate the objection and find out if there's any other objections. So acknowledge it. Cool. Cool. Is there anything else? You know what I mean? Is there any other? So it's just the money. Is there anything else? When you say the money, can you help me understand by that? So it's just like understanding the objection that they're giving you and finding out if there's any others. The mistake people make is they try and, okay, cool. Oh, so it's money. Okay, well, we could do this. We could do this. And they try and overcome that objection. And then as soon as you overcome it, guess what? The client's got another objection. And then you rush to overcome that. And then guess what? They have another. And so you first want to identify, and I think we always just talk about on my old sales team is we used to look at it like doors. And it's like, okay, there's all these doors that the client could escape from, right? So you first want to identify where the doors are. What are all the doors? Are they legit? Because if they are legit, and this is where it comes down to like actually removing yourself from the attachment of outcome and not just trying to sell someone for the sake of convincing them, but being like, does this actually make sense? Because some of the objections, it will kill the deal. And so if that's what it is, let's just acknowledge it. But if you can overcome it, cool. Well, let's work on this together. Let's overcome it. But before you start overcoming it, what are the other objections? So just identifying all the objections that exist before you start overcoming them is the best advice I can give on in the moment objection handling. Now, if you really want to go meta on this thing and even approach it from a better point of view, it's think about it this way. When a client throws you an objection, right? It's coming at you. And now you have to, you've got to hit that ball. It's like, it's my problem. I got to handle this objection. It's my responsibility now. And now with that framework, it's just never going to really work because whenever you're trying to do something and try and solve a problem, clients typically will pull back because you're trying to convince them. So you kind of want to solve it with them. You want to solve it with them. Now, what's even better though, is if you can bring up the objections first, which isn't a new concept. A lot of sales coaches, consultants, whatever, a lot of books talk about this, like you bring up the objection first. But the thing that people struggle with is people struggle sometimes to understand what that objection is. For example, the objection could be, and I'm sure you've dealt with this one many times, is you're speaking to somebody who's already hired 10 different marketing agencies who've failed them and they lost a lot of money. And now they're walking around a little bit nervous because they're like, man, like I can't afford to make another mistake hiring you, dude. Like, how do I know that you're legit? And so as soon as it starts moving to like, how do I know that like this isn't going to be different? How do I know that you're going to really be able to help us, Dean? Do you feel how like you automatically are now having to prove to them, well, I've been in the industry 10 years. Well, I've already helped some guys in your industry. And so now you're trying to plead to them your case of how things will be different with you. So instead, what you want to do is when the client is bringing that up to you at the beginning of the call or midway through the call, and they're like, you know what? Yeah. So you're asking them, what have you tried? So what have you done from, oh, we hired these guys. That didn't work. We hired these guys. We hired these guys. We hired these guys. So now I'm starting to be like, okay, that's going to kill the deal later. Like that's going to be weighing heavily on their mind and that could kill this deal for me. So instead of waiting for them to express that now as the concern, now that it's decision-making time, I want to just pose that as hypothetical to them. And I go, it's interesting to hear you say that you've worked with so many agencies and it hasn't quite worked. Like, why do you feel like that is? Try and identify that, try and figure out what the thing is. Because the last thing I want to do is come in and have the same result. Now, the other thing I want to ask them is, so, help me understand this. Like, is it realistic? I mean, if you've had this many bad experiences, like what's it going to take for you to actually get to a point where you're willing to hire another agency? Like, why would now be the right time for you? And what would it take for you to actually decide on an agency? What would you need to know about an agency to feel comfortable go out again and making an investment in the marketing? Are you up for that? Do you see how all this language is about seeing how they're going to get around that problem? How are you going to overcome this obstacle that I'm foreseeing?
I mean, there's two massive points there. And I won't sort of give specifics, but obviously there was a call, that I sort of reviewed, and the particular person started at the top. I know you need this. Literally everything that you've said I know that you need this, right? You've tried it before, it hasn't worked. I can get you to where you want to go, but it's going to cost you this, you know? And by lowering the price and almost like a staircase, that is not going to make anything better. I think that's the first thing that
Yeah.
you've mentioned. Just because you drop the
Yep.
price, this particular person actually asked, like, how does that feel? Now that I've gone down a step, how does that feel? She said, yeah, that feels a little bit better. But
Yeah.
really, man,
Could you do a little bit more? Could you take off a little bit more off the price?
can you just sweeten it a little bit, just add some sugar on there? But look, so on a serious point, like you just said, you can keep going down the staircase until you get to zero, but that's not going to
Yeah.
solve the problem, is it?
Well, the client's looking at the time and they think, well, geez, every 2 minutes I stay on the call, the price, we're dropping $500 or whatever. I might as well just hold on to this call as long as I can and see if we can get this down to $20.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, so it's important. It's really important. Like a lesson in that is, price is really secondary. It, the price does not matter. It's completely irrelevant until 100% that this person is in a position to buy
mhm,
and they see the value. There's an
yeah,
urgency there. They're ready to actually make their transit, like to have this transformation, and they trust you.
yeah.
And it's like, are they really, really ready? And if all those things are checked off, they get it, they're on board with all those things. Now we can figure out a way to make the money work.
Mhm. I had a point on your second point because you made 2 points there.
Okay.
Um, just go back to what were you sort of going on that second point? Because I had something really to add on there.
So I was kind of talking about how getting the exploring potential uh, deal killing, like
Mm.
exploring things that are going to kill the deal ahead of time. So that way you
Yeah,
get the customer to actually explain to you how they're going to overcome it, as opposed to
yeah,
waiting to the end of the
that's right.
call.
Yeah. And here's my point with that. I think even myself and a lot of people, uh, they skim on client those things that the client says. So, for example,
Yeah.
like a typical like agency example, right? So if someone's considering like either using like a freelancer against a big agency, a typical objection will be like, like as a freelancer, do you even have the resources to be able to like handle my company and like provide that service? And then like I've had an in the past, like I just like, yeah, I can do it and just brush over it and not actually acknowledging like this person is stuck because of their perception of what, and I haven't really answered that. And there's so many
Yeah.
more examples where if
Super good
you
awareness.
if you skim over and you don't have that awareness of what the client is actually saying in that moment, that's going to come back to bite you at the end. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. I had another client recently. I was on a call and it was like the guy had mentioned a few times that they're ready to hire somebody, but that they had an internal team. And
Hmm,
so
hmm.
Spidey sensors are going off, and I'm like, hey, we gotta like you want to unpack that with them because I've lost a lot of this stuff comes from like experience, right? Where it's like I've lost so many deals to these things that you wisen up, right? When you're on a call and everything's going so great, and they say they have this internal marketing team, but they really they want to really consider hiring somebody who's great to come in and do a better job. Yeah, it sounds good. It sounds like a great pitch. And then you go through and tell them how amazing you are. You put together this amazing proposal, and they're like, "Yeah, would you send that over to me?" You send it over to them, and we're going to chat with our team. And then they get back to you, and they're like, "Yeah, you know what? I chatted with our internal team, and we're gonna give our internal team a little bit more time."
Mm, mm.
So, and by the way, and I hope anybody that's listening to this that's in sales or has a sales team, like think call and like sit with that and be like, you knew the whole time, right? In the back of your mind, you're like, "Ah, I hope this guy doesn't go back to his team because that could really kill the deal." But it's like instead of just sitting in silence and just crossing your
And just
fingers and hoping
waiting.
that this guy's sign, that's what most
Yeah,
people do because they're afraid. Most people are afraid to bring up the thing that could kill the deal, and I'm not.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
I hope that guys I work with, right, are not afraid to bring it up.
yeah,
Because instead, what
yeah,
you want to do is you're like, hey, so I'm loving this discussion. I'm loving the fact that you guys are open minded to go out and hiring somebody. And I know you have a very high expectation around this team coming in. And, I hope you feel great about us. Like we are those guys. Like we're incredibly great at what we do. What I'd like to understand though is like, are you guys realistically at a place where you would move this work off from because you do have an internal team? How is that going to sit with your company, having you guys outsource this? Is that going to go over well? Have you already had that discussion? Who else is the decision makers in your company? Are they supportive of this? Do you see how I'm like analyzing that and figuring out all those little things? Because now it gives him an opportunity to work on that with me. And now typically what people will do is they'll now sell you. Well, yeah, we just need to do it. And they might give you, they might literally solve it themselves by being like, well, to be honest, our internal team has been doing this for 6 years. And they were really doing well for the first 4, but the last 2 years, our results have just completely crushed, and I've just lost faith in them. Okay, well, what is there any reason to believe that they would be able to turn that around, or are you guys just done, going down that road? You know what I mean? So you really want to put that to bed, and they'll usually give you the answer because there's a reason. You got to remember, there's a reason they booked in the call.
Yeah,
because they're ready for this.
That's just such if we go back to the first question, how to sell anything to anyone, I think when I think about that sentence, you've really got to figure out and be very aware and conscious of what people are saying before you can sell. Because once you figure out what the roadblocks are and those trapdoors, and that they're there. It's like playing a game. The trapdoor's there. Acknowledge that trapdoor. You're not just going to walk straight into it, right? I've actually never heard of that one. So I think basically like everything that you're saying is really based around knowing the room that you're in and where are the doors, where are the trapdoors, acknowledging and saying to the potential client, hey, there's a trapdoor over there. Are we going to jump in, or are we going to talk about that? That trapdoor that's
and it's not like clients are sneaky either. It's not like they're trying to hide the
no,
a lot of times they're not it's not even in their perception. They're not aware that it's there, but when you hear them talk, it's there in the back of their mind. So you're just helping them to be like, are you seeing that too?
Yeah.
Like, bro, are you seeing this? Like, is it just me or am I seeing this over here? And then they're like, oh yeah, I didn't really think about that. Nah, you know what? That's actually old news. Yeah, we can board that off. Okay, cool. It's boarded.
Yeah.
And the reason why we want to board those things off earlier on in the call is because at the end of the call, everything will be exposed. When money gets involved in the sales conversation, all the windows and doors that you didn't shut will be exposed. So you want to make sure that you explore them early on in the call before that closing time, because that's when people are going to be open and honest in how to work through those. And by the way, how to sell anything to everybody, anything to everybody. It's like, that's like, there are times where you got to let the deal go. If you're pointing out the trap door and they're like, you know what? Yeah, actually, I probably my team more time. Like, we're just not ready to outsource this. Cool. Okay. Well, I'm glad we had that discussion. Well, how much time do they need? We'll probably give them 3 more months. Okay. Let's touch base in 3 months.
Yeah.
And you see how the energy is light? It's cool. That's awesome. Let's do that then.
Yeah, I mean, I had a couple more things because I feel like there's so much fire in this, man. I want to keep on, if that's cool with you.
I got the time. Hit me, bro.
No, this is really valuable.
Not burning out your audience. Not burning out your audience with a 4-hour podcast. I mean, hit me, dude.
Yeah. This is real fire, man. And I feel like something that we haven't touched on, that this is more for like business owners, right? Is 2 things. And I don't know if you want to separate these or you want to keep them the same. So we discussed this one, how do you treat in-person sales differently than online, like a Zoom call like this? The second thing on that is that, and I don't know if you want to handle this separately, is I speak to, like in the past sort of 5-10 years, I've spoken to so many business owners that want to cash in now. And when I say they want to cash in, they expect that every lead that they get in is like ready to go, ready to sell. Let's go. Let's get on a Zoom call. Boom, boom, boom. Let's get on an in-person sales meeting, sell the deal, and then that's all they have to do. And I really want to sort of talk about, what, like, obviously the difference between in-person sales and digital sales, like online, but then also how important is it for people to actually have a pipeline, and what is the definition of a pipeline? These are two big things that I think people get completely wrong,
Yeah.
because in my opinion, and I'll let you have your say, but I've spoken to so many people that I said, I asked them the question. I said, like, you've been in business for 10 years, right? Besides the leads that you're getting in that are referrals, or that are ready to buy today, like, do you have at least 50 to 100 people that you've got that are ready, potential people ready to buy in the next 1, 2, 3 to 6 months, that you can call upon today and just start just nurturing that relationship? And most businesses say no. Depends on the industry, right? But most businesses that I'm sort of, say, service based, or like a plumber or a pest control person or anything like that. Love to hear. I
Yeah.
mean, those are two big topics, so I'll leave that
Yeah.
to have your
So yeah,
thoughts.
the in-person and Zoom conversation. I mean, for me, the conversation is just different dependent on where you're at with the sale. So where
Mhm.
they're at in the pipeline, how warm or cold the lead is. For instance, when you're knocking on doors, like, objection handling or deep rapport building isn't really the first thing you have to worry about. The first thing you need to worry about is how to break their preoccupation and get them to give you a minute before they shut the door on you, right? Cold calling is the same. It's like, how do you create a hook that's good enough to break their preoccupation? Because everybody's doing something, whether it's staring at their phone or actually working. They were doing something that was holding their attention before you called them. So you're going to have to break that, right? But then it's like, once you get into the sale and you're sitting down with them, or you've set an appointment as a door-to-door salesperson, and you come back and you're sitting at their kitchen table, it's the same. Whether you're in a Zoom meeting or that, it's no different, right? You still have a process you're going to go through, and which I won't go through a whole sales process right now, but you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Different.
exactly. No, no, yeah, 100%. And the second part of
I'm not
the,
sure.
yeah, you go.
I was just gonna say, I'm not 100% sure I get what your question was around the pipeline. It's just like the importance of having a
Well,
pipeline.
man, like, thinking about a local pest control guy, right? A local
Yeah,
plumber, a electrician, a um a bathroom renovation guy, a tree lopper,
sure,
a whatever
sure.
service based. It could even be other service based. It could be like finance. It could be anything. Like, the amount of
Yeah.
business owners that I speak that react to leads coming in now, today, and just treating that's my pipeline, rather than like, hey, I've had like 1,000 inquiries over the last year. These people are going to want to do this, and touching base with them.
Okay. I think I get where you're
You
going.
ask a tree lofter, you ask a plumber, you ask a bathroom renovation person, hey,
I'm with you.
are you guys even calling these people? They're like, nah, mate, I'm just on the job.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I have a good example of this. So I brought on a client, one of my first clients last year, brought him on in February. Um, he was pretty good, right? Like, we cleaned up some stuff in the sales process. I won't go too much into it, but there was like an hour and a half sales call because he was like going over this big demo and stuff. And we cut it down to like a 30-minute call. So we really optimized his sales call. We also optimized some automations on the front end to help us cut time out. And anyways, he was already closing at a pretty good rate, but his issue was that he was doing everything in his business. He was already wearing too many hats. And so I helped him place a sales rep to take over his role. And one of the things I prepped him with is like, hey, bro, your close rate's pretty good. We had already worked together on it. So it's pretty good. I just want to be honest with you and saying it might drop a little bit when we bring somebody in because they're not the owner. So I hope you can accept that and appreciate that's a potential reality. And he was like, "Hey man, I appreciate you being honest. I just can't do this anymore. So it is what it is. Let's get the best guy we can, and let's train him as best we can, and let's get the most out of this, right?" Well, sure enough, I brought somebody in who didn't know a damn thing about his industry, video editing service, subscription model, really cool business. And it was actually a friend of mine that ended up taking the role. It was a perfect fit. And he just hit the ground running. His close rate ended up being, it was like his close rate in like the first couple months was like something like 60%, some crazy figure. It was like almost double what the owner was doing. And to your point, the reason for that was the original business owner who was running it didn't have enough time to follow up with the leads. So he was really only signing up the people who signed up. He was only signing up the people that showed up to the call and signed up.
Yeah.
Whereas the sales rep, although he didn't know every little detail about the business, right? He had more time on his hands to follow up. And so it was just like the actual time spent and going over old leads, setting follow-up calls, all those things. So that was one of my biggest, like, it surprised me. Like, I was like, man, I totally underestimated the value of having a sales rep in a company. Like, so for anyone listening to this who's like, man, I can't let go of this because like no one's going to close like me. Maybe they can't close like you. Maybe you are the best thing since sliced bread and you're closing at 50%. Good for you. But are you really following up as good as you could be? Like, are you really spending enough time in the other areas of your pipeline? Are you automating contact with the rest of your pipeline?
Yeah.
And if like getting somebody else in could actually net you a better result and put 20 hours, 30 hours back in your calendar every week.
Dude. And do you know what the funny thing is? You're just saying what you just said is exactly what I meant. Video editing service. It's the same service as a plumber, a tree lopper, a video editor. It's the same, providing a service. And these types of business owners, they can close when, someone's inquired, like off the back of a Google inquiry. These people are red hot, ready to go, right? But where they, like you said, they struggle is like building that pipeline. Yep, I've got 100 people that they're interested. They're just not ready quite. They're not quite ready now. And just making sure that you've got a sequence for that, and you're always regularly touching base and not trying to figure out. Sometimes I speak to people and they say it's a lead problem, but I'm like, you've already got all the leads. You've already got.
Because theoretically they could double the leads and they'd get more sales. But that costs a lot more money.
Yeah.
Whereas they can just get more efficient and get more out of what they're doing. You shouldn't, I mean, you should really do both. You should get more leads, but you should also figure out how to maximize squeezing the most juice out of what you already have.
And and I think that's what you said at the start of the call, efficiency. And that's where people are. There's so many people that and business owners that just are not efficient, Last question, man. Hey?
I was just gonna say, and it makes sense if you're a business owner and you're wearing all the hats. Like, I get it; it's a good excuse to say, "Well, I just don't have time to follow up the leads." Like, it's a good excuse, but like, find a way to automate it. Then get an AI tool that messages your clients. I know, Dean, you talked about doing that yourself. Like, get someone like Dean to help you with that. But whatever it is, like, don't use that as an excuse and just like turn up the cost of your leads just because you're not finding the time. You either hire a salesperson or start automating some of this stuff.
Yeah.
So you're not just like, because you already spent good money on the leads, probably. You're probably paying a marketing agency a lot of money for these leads. So you want to do your damnedest to get the most out of them. So,
yeah. And dead lead is a lead that is dead once you've called them and followed up for 12, 24 months. And then it's dead when they've said 2 letters, N-O. That's when it's dead. But until that point, you can still, it's not a dead lead.
I mean, that's still only that's only no for now. I mean, it's like you really, the mentality behind it is like, you should have the mentality where it's like, I will follow up with you until one of us dies. That's it.
I don't know about that one, but that's a good point. I get your point. I mean, yeah, like that, or unless someone has literally said to you, like, do not message me again,
Yeah.
And even then you might even say, then you would still message them later on. But obviously, you need to figure out what suits.
Things change.
Yeah, things change, man. Last question, man. Going to last questions. I think this is a really good one because this really is like an emotional thing. It's almost like, I don't know how to explain it, but it is probably the most emotional thing a human can go through, sales, besides relationships and partners and that. I really do feel that, in my experience, it's been so emotional. So what are the things that you would recommend for people to, I mean, the interesting thing is, before I ask you the question, is I've seen so many different types of salespeople. Some salespeople, you look at them and they're very emotional, and then some salespeople, they just disassociate all and any emotion with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're all
And
different.
exactly. And
Hmm.
how do you sort of, regardless of who you are, how do you stay focused and
Yeah.
how do you stay consistent?
Yeah. Well, I'd say if I fall more into the emotional side, which means that in my career, I have ups and downs, where when I'm in slumps, I feel terrible, and I've had other friends around me that are like Terminators and they show up with the same energy every day. And I'm like, wow, these guys are able to do that. Right. And so it's kind of just like having some self love, understanding yourself. It's like self mastery, understanding what makes you tick, having patience with yourself. Those are some things, and also installing consistent, like how you do anything is how you do everything, right? So if your life is a complete roller coaster where you're waking up at a different time every day, sometimes you go to the gym, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you go home after work and watch Netflix for 4 hours. Sometimes you read a book, you know, whatever it is. If you're all over the place, sometimes you stay up till 1 a.m. Sometimes you go to bed at 10,
Mhm.
right? Then it kind of just it weaves in to everything. And so it's like, how can you be consistent at work when you're not being consistent in your life?
Mhm.
So what I found that helps is having a consistent, like, wake up time, having a consistent workout plan, having a
Mhm.
consistent meditation every day, installing good practices, whatever that is for you. But getting that consistency will bleed over into work being consistent and just detaching from the outcome, which I know is easier said than done. But I've just had so many times in my career in the past where I've had a bad sales month or something, and I've like taken it personal and started saying things to myself like, "Oh, did you forget the sale? Like, did you forget how to sell? Like, do I just suck now?" And like really buying into that and being like, maybe it's just over for me. I can seriously think back to times where I had that dark of things, and literally, you can have such a bad month where you literally want to quit your job in
Yeah.
sales,
Yeah.
right? And so, as a business owner, it's the same thing. See the same thing with business owners that they get so down on themselves. Oh, we had such a great year, and now starting off January, and we haven't even done this, and I just don't know what to do. And it's like maybe there are things you need to do. Maybe it's like actually changing something, right? Maybe the leads dried up because you changed something. So there are technical things, and maybe that's what it is. But a lot of times it's just like accepting that like this too shall pass,
Mm.
and like you just accept that hey, like it is what it is. Like so it's just a little sun and some rain, and it is what it is. So kind of just like letting a bad month or letting the emotion be there and just cool. Well, that's what it is. So I guess I'll just suck for this week then. That's cool. And just kind of accepting that that's where it is. I
Mhm.
has always allowed me to snap back into it and get back into flow.
Yeah. And what I was going to say was, I think that, to sort of summarize, I think whether you're, whether you're a individual, a freelancer, whether you're in a large company, you might own the company, you might be working in the company. I think what we've discussed today really applies in pretty much all industries, pretty much whatever you're selling, and there's not a real big difference in the way,
Yeah.
and it really only, I feel like the way you sell really only changes based on who you are, you know? What are your
Yeah.
sort of thoughts on that
Yeah.
to end?
Yeah. I mean, the higher ticket the thing, the more is involved in that decision. So the more this stuff matters. If you're selling a pencil off the shelf, it's not going to be the big as big of a discussion. But yeah. But I would just say, and I'm biased because I'm a coach, but like invest. The other thing you can do if you want to improve your sales or your team sales is invest in people that can help you with that.
Yeah.
You know, like that's what I've always done. I've hired coaches everywhere I've gone. I haven't always told people because I wanted an advantage and I'm sneaky like that. But I've hired sales coaches when I was working for different companies to give me an edge. And it's like,
Yeah.
always be chasing that edge. Always be chasing that edge. Like, how can I get better every day? How can I get better? Not just settling for I will get better because I've worked here for 2 years, 3 years. I'm just going to naturally get better. It's like, how can I intentionally go out and get better?
Yeah, exactly. And in saying that, I will actually leave a link in the description. So if you have watched this and you've got a lot of value, I personally can recommend you as well because I'm in the group. And obviously, I think I don't need to say it much more because obviously what this video is value. So if you guys do want to obviously to chat more with Brock, I'll leave the link in the description. But thanks, man. Thank you so much for jumping on this. I think there's been absolute value bombs on here. And I think
Thanks, bro.
there's so many different nuggets for different people on this. So I really appreciate that, man.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on, man. Good to see you. Good to chat.